Hi everyone, here is something a little different for you. To be honest, this one isn't really about the pictures, although before you ask, most of these photographs of Dublin are taken with my Fuji X100F. A few selfies were taken with my mobile phone. Anyway, this is just a simple personal story I wanted to share. 18 years ago, my uncle and aunt travelled to Dublin. Always fascinated by family history, my uncle wanted to visit my grandmother's place of birth, 3 Grace Park Road, Drumcondra, Dublin. They made the journey, but on reaching the road saw that there was no number 3, and where he guessed it had once stood, on the other side of the street, there was now a football field, that of Drumcondra Football Club. Once back home, they would have told my mother and my grandmother that the house was no longer standing, but that same day he visited her place of birth, my grandmother died, so she was never told. For many years I visited Dublin, but never made the trip up to the football field. However, last December, after many months of filling in forms, I visited Dublin for the first time with my own Irish passport. It was an emotional process to go through, and to mark it, on this trip my brother and I said that we would finally visit our grandmother's place of birth. I remember asking my parents for my grandmother's old address. We were reminded that the house wasn't there, but we still wanted to go, and we headed up to the closest spot we could find. We walked up from the city centre to the area of Drumcondra. When we reached the road, sure enough, there was no number 3, but we stood across the street close to the football field where we guessed number 3 might have been, and I imagined my uncle and aunt standing in hopefully the same spot all of those years ago, thinking just the same. Of course, they would have been feeling a little more disappointed than us, having just discovered that it wasn't there. We were just happy to be standing on the same road on which she was born. I'm not sure what my uncle and aunt did next, but we decided to go to the church where she had been baptized over 100 years ago. It was a short walk, and when we entered the church, I saw people putting up Christmas decorations. I explained to one lady what had brought us to the church, and she enthusiastically said, "Oh, did you want to see the records? The man you need to speak to will be back in just a moment." Soon the man returned, spoke to us briefly, disappeared to get the records, and returned again. I gave him the dates of my grandmother's birth, and sure enough, just a couple of weeks later she had been baptized in the church where we now stood. As I ran my finger down the list of entries, I reached her address. I spoke it out loud and said that we had just been there, but that of course the house wasn't there anymore. I remember saying that in a strange hope that I still can't quite explain. I just had a faint feeling. And I remember he replied so confidently and casually that it was just perfect. Oh, no houses were knocked down there, they just changed the numbers. 3 would be 6 now. He had lived in that little area all of his life, and there was no way he wouldn't have known that. My brother and I looked at each other smiling. Those stupid selfies that we had taken, with a supposedly special bit of football field in the background, seemed pretty silly now. A new selfie needed to be taken. Smiling and quite honestly feeling that we were on a bit of an adventure, we thanked the man and walked back to Grace Park Road. As we got closer, I imagined my great-grandfather and great-grandmother walking up the road towards their house with my infant grandmother in their hands. And then we saw knowingly for the first time the house that our grandmother was born in. Once 3 Grace Park Road, now number 6. Modest, simple, mid-terrace, much like our own house back in England. So I thought again of my uncle and aunt standing close to the house all those years ago, not knowing that it was the house where his mother was born. He would have loved to have learnt that news from us, but had sadly died earlier in the year. Still, our parents and aunt were thrilled to hear the news. Our little bit of Dublin history was still standing. Eileen Violet Kitteringham, née Le Bourne, was the name of my grandmother. Born in Dublin on 22nd of November 1914 and died in Hemmingford Gray, England on the 2nd of July, the year 2000.